Upendra Dwivedi, the Chief of Army Staff of the Indian Army, said in a statement that a two-front war is no longer a possibility for India. It's a reality.
We think that we are in a different league.
Is once again at the cusp of a kind of a revolution. China has ordered 1 million one-way attack drones.
The object of war is to change state behavior.
How have autonomous systems changed the character of warfare? Greetings everyone, this is the GEOSTRATA and I'm Vaibhav Singh. I welcome you all to this very important panel discussion titled Autonomous Battles, Reimagining the India-Pakistan Conflict in this age of intelligence warfare. In today's world, the battlefield is not just about soldiers and missiles. It's about algorithms, it's about autonomy, it's about information. The ongoing shift that we have seen in warfare is powered by unmanned systems, AI-enabled surveillance, loitering munitions, and multi-domain operations that redefine the whole conflict geography. As India pursues defense modernization and strategic autonomy, it faces new threats, sometimes from Pakistan's asymmetric warfare, sometimes from the increasing technological collaboration that we see between both of our prime adversaries. This panel aims to explore how emerging technologies, especially autonomous defense systems, are transforming the India-Pakistan conflict dynamic. And now India must recalibrate its military doctrine, its strategic posture, and its operational capabilities in this new era. To discuss this very pressing issue, we are joined by 5 distinguished experts who bring together decades of operational experience, policy insights, and technological perspectives. So now to start the session, I'll be coming to each speaker with a brief introduction of theirs to give them time to have their introductory remarks. So first on the panel, we would have Rear Admiral K. Raja Menon. His focus are naval doctrine, maritime deterrence, and escalation control through autonomy. He's an honorary fellow at the National Maritime Foundation. Admiral Menon is a leading naval strategist and defense thinker whose work has shaped India's understanding of limited war and sea power. His perspective is key to how India's maritime posture can evolve using AI and unmanned systems. So now, Rear Admiral, if you could have the floor.
Yeah. I'm very glad to be here. I'm very glad to be here. But are there any specific questions that you're asking or generally?
So first for your introductory remarks, and then we'll go into the questions.
Yes. As far as the maritime theater is concerned, I'm sure you're all aware that the Navy has for many years been concentrating primarily on the other large threat, which is considerably larger than the threat posed by Pakistan. So, as far as the threat from Pakistan is concerned, we think that we are in a different league. Our concerns are more with our friend from the north than from the threat from the west. But if the threat from the west is going to pose a threat at all, then we don't see any problem in reorienting our forces to deal with that. As far as I know you are asking about strategic autonomy and intelligence warfare. You want to concentrate on that, but I just want to caution you about one small aspect, which is that this development of strategic weapons and possible intelligence warfare doesn't change the basic motivation, causes, and termination of war. It's a technological development, like in fact the aircraft was in the mid-1930s, 1940s, or the tank was in 1920. It changes the way in which battles will be fought. But the primary causes of war, and most importantly, the conduct and of supreme importance, the termination of war, remains as it has been for the past 2 centuries. And in that area, as you well know, uh, Pakistan has three nuclear thresholds. And one of those thresholds is a real life problem for them, which is that their country may be economically strangled by the Indian Navy. So um, that aspect remains and is not going to be changed substantially by the development of this new technology. Is that enough for a start?
Yes, sir. I think that's more than enough. You have perfectly encapsulated how the Indian Navy works, how we are leaps and bounds ahead, whether it's just number of tech or the technology that we have against our Western, not neighbor, but adversary is something that I would rather term it as. And we are in that league where we are not eyeing Pakistan as the major adversary in the region, but we try to remain like we try to be the primary force, or we try to remain the primary supplier of peace in the Indian Ocean region. I think that's what the Indian Navy's view for the next 10 to 15 or maybe 20 years is what we have like gotten from a statement, and like all other major policy things that we have seen from the forces. With that, I would now move to Lieutenant Colonel J.S. Sodhi. He is a former Corps of Engineers from Indian Army. His focus are land warfare evolution, drone strategy, indigenous tech, and joint ops. Colonel Sodhi combines field experience with strategic insight into how India's ground forces adapt to emerging tech. He's a strong voice for Atmanirbhar Bharat and integrated warfare. So, Mr. J.S. Sodhi, if you could now begin with your introductory remarks, sir.
Jai Hind. It is my honor and privilege to be part of this esteemed panel. First and foremost, my heartfelt gratitude to GeoStrata for having included me as one of the panelists and giving me the opportunity to air my views. Well, definitely, Operation Sindoor has been a huge military success for India, which is evident by the vast evidence in every Indian briefing which was carried out after 7th May early morning. You know, the basic difference between the briefing of India vis-a-vis Pakistan was whatever India spoke, we corroborated it with hard evidence which the Pakistanis could not refute. So definitely it has been a great military success for India. But we should also understand now that our main threat is not Pakistan. For us, Pakistan was always a challenge we would always win. We have seen in the last 4 wars, we've always won. We have, in fact, broken Pakistan into 2 parts in 1971. So Pakistan per se is not a big military challenge for us. We are fully prepared for it since 1947. But the next big military challenge for us will be the two-front war with China and Pakistan. In fact, this year, on 17th March, General Upendra Dwivedi, the Chief of Army Staff of the Indian Army, said in a statement that a two-front war is no longer a possibility for India. It's a reality, unquote. With all the timelines in the public domain, we are pointing towards the 2035 two-front war with China and Pakistan. 2 years back, on 7th August 2023, General Manoj Naravne, the 28th Chief of Army Staff of the Indian Army, in an article The Print, wrote that a two-front war will pose a lot of difficulties for India. So definitely, as we bask in the success of Operation Sindoor, there are many lessons that we would have learned, which the Chief of Defense Staff also said in the interview with Bloomberg and Reuters in Singapore, they were yesterday. So we should take it, what lessons we have learned, what needs more to be done, because the future warfare will be pretty different than the warfare which we had been seeing till few decades back when we fought the last war with Pakistan in 1999. You know, after the success of the US-led 42-nation coalition in the 1991 Gulf War, 10 years later in 2001, USA came out with a new military doctrine called the Full Spectrum Operation Doctrine of 2001, which said the modern wars will be fought in all the 6 domains: land, sea, air, cyber, electromagnetic spectrum, and space. Today, we are in 2025. Until date, only one country has said in the military doctrine that they are ready to fight in all the 6 domains, and that is China, when in the military doctrine of 2014, they said this. Definitely, India has proven its mettle. Our integrated air defense system has proven to be much better than the Israel's famed Iron Dome, wherein in the October 723 attack, the Hamas could penetrate the Iron Dome. But what the Pakis tried with us in Operation Sindoor in the 88-hour operation, they could not penetrate the Indian integrated air defense system. So definitely we are on a high. And like I said, we would have learned a lot of lessons and definitely they will help us to enhance our combat preparedness and combat potential for the two-front war. Thank you.
Thank you so much for those remarks, sir. I think I totally agree with you that warfare has changed so much. Even like if not from 1999 to the current year 2025, I think even from the skirmishes that we have seen over the years, technology has changed so much. I think which is why a lot of reiteration by all the forces, especially the air force, were made, where we need to have certain technologies which gives us an edge over our adversaries, whether it be BVR missiles or whether it be AVAC systems. I think with it, like now the time has come that war doesn't change. Like after 5 years, I think it's more like a 1 year game, because we see that how drone warfare has changed in Russia just in like the past 6 months, how they have gone from wireless communication of drones to now using fiber optics to control drones to counter anti-electronic warfare systems. So I think we agree with you there, sir, that a lot has changed in technology and we continuously need to make a strive, because we have a much stronger adversary to face in the future. So now coming to Captain K.S. Vikramaditya, who is a serving naval officer and senior fellow at the National Maritime Foundation. His focus lies in operational use of autonomous platforms and naval interoperability. Captain Vikramaditya bridges the strategic and operational spheres of naval warfare. His insights show how frontline deployments of unmanned systems are shaping India's readiness. So, Captain, if you could now go ahead with your opening remarks.
Uh, uh, Good evening to my fellow panelists. Good evening, Weber. Thank you for this opportunity and thank you for the kind words. It actually puts a lot of pressure onto me. Very special good evening to Rajamanan sir and to Sodi sir. It's good to see you on the screen, sir. I'll just I'll try and stick to, the very, very specific topic in terms of autonomous systems. Now, a lot of contemporary conflicts have demonstrated that many established notions of superiority, such as the belief that expensive, high-end manned platforms provide a guaranteed advantage. Now, these are being challenged by very, very inexpensive yet very effective autonomous systems. Now, while unmanned systems offer an extremely wide range of capabilities, and most of these would come up in our discussions subsequently, I would imagine, I would like to focus on one particular aspect that perhaps escapes the deliberation that it merits, and that is the mass deployment of attack or kamikaze drones. Am I audible? Or I hope I'm not on mute.
No,
Yeah.
sir, you are clearly audible.
You're audible, sir.
Okay. Yeah. So recent conflicts have shown us that warfare is once again at the cusp of a kind of a revolution. The democratization of technology has resulted in capabilities such as precision targeting and the ability to field massed effects. Earlier, which was the domain only of established powers, now being available to even quasi and even non-state actors. Drones and unmanned systems have been at the forefront of this change. Michael Horowitz, in his very influential article published in Foreign Affairs, calls this the age of precise mass. In another article in War Quants, a gentleman named Sean Harper brings out that there are reports that China has ordered 1 million one-way attack drones. Mind you, one-way attack drones are the bigger drones. They are not the smaller first-person view drones. Now, he goes on to describe a model wherein China could achieve 71 days of suppression across the entire first island chain using just these drones. And it would cost China just about $6.66 billion per year for 3 years. If the cost of each drone is brought down to approximately $20,000, which is the actual cost of an Iranian Shahid one-way attack drone. Now, Pakistan attempted to saturate Indian air defenses using a combination of one-way attack drones, weaponized quadcopters and missiles during the recent conflict. What came out loud and clear is the unstinted support from China and Turkey that Pakistan enjoys. And in that context, the almost endless flow of unmanned systems into Pakistan that can be expected during a conflict with India. Now, Sindoor has spelled out certain very, very tough and almost unprecedented red lines. While on the one hand, there is hope that Pakistan would pay heed to these, there is also a belief that this will not be the case. Now, in such a situation, would a stock of, say, 250,000 one-way attack drones provide India the ability to respond immediately to the next Pulwama or Pahalgam? Would the promise of continuing attacks by 1,400 OWA drones daily over a 6-month period, or that with 5,000 drones daily for 50 days, which comes out to 250,000 that I proposed, deter Pakistan? When placed on board ships, such drones would provide an entirely different dimension of capability. Now, it could be forcefully argued that precise mass provides conventional deterrence. Now, the possibilities presented by precise mass need to be internalized. The higher defense structures of most countries, including India, will otherwise find it difficult to choose drones alongside or instead of high value items such as fighter jets and aircraft carriers that visibly demonstrate strength, prestige, and status. It must also be borne in mind that unmanned and attritable systems give far more flexibility than conventional weapons. Their use can be recalibrated constantly, managing escalation. Further, the loss of drones doesn't invoke the kind of outrage that a manned platform would. I will limit my initial comments to this. As we move on, once we go to the question and answer session, I'm sure many other things related to this would come up. Thank you.
Thank you so much for those introductory notes from you. I think one of the most important points you could pick up from that is that like all these unmanned systems and their specific use in quasi-static or non-state actors. Like that is something that is of utmost importance to India. That we also need to secure the ability to make sure that these drones or these cheap unmanned aerial vehicles are not landing in the incorrect hands in Pakistan, because something that we have seen is that a lot of military assets are always dispensed to their terror organizations, which are state sponsored terror organizations. So that also I think becomes a very important part of India planning its defense, that how do we counter that. So coming from that point, now we'll come to Mr. Ankit Kumar, assistant professor at the Rashtriya Raksha University. His focus lies in strategic doctrine, drone warfare evolution, and policy implications. Mr. Ankit Kumar offers a policy and academic lens to understand the evolution of warfare in Southeast Asia and South Asia. His expertise links tech trends with doctrinal shifts in armed forces. So, Mr. Ankit, if you could begin with your introduction.
Thank you, Weber, for having me here. And I'm very happy to be in the company of those whom I have read and learned a lot, especially Admiral Menon. Thanks a lot for inviting me. A few of the key points which I will focus on will remain restricted to, three of my panel member have already spoken quite, about drones and all, but I would restrict myself in covering few points which are related to warfare, and specifically in relation to, the changes in the doctrine which was part of specifically this Op Sindoor and the confrontation between India and Pakistan. Firstly, it was the confrontation was revolutionary when it comes to drone warfare technology. Just yesterday we saw how Ukraine there was a drone strike on the Russian bases, which was known as Operation Spider's Web. It was, I believe, coordinated, 117 drone operations which targeted around aircraft which was worth 7 billion, which was across thousands of kilometers away. So, I mean, that's something which is remarkable globally happening, which is the reality in South Asia and is the future of warfare. Specifically, when it comes to when it comes to India, what is noticeable here is how the multi-layered air defense system works, and especially in the case of India, where there is a combination of indigenous and technologies that are imports, especially S-400 and Barak. They have coordinated very well with systems like Akash Tir, which actually worked really well in terms of real-time threat and threat processing. In other aspects, we also have how information warfare was a strategic weapon. If you closely look, how the war was not just happening in the battlefield, but it was happening on social media. It was happening through narrative building, doctored videos, fabricated claims. And some of it was social media manipulation. Part of which was sort of, I would categorize it in psychological warfare, which was being undertaken, which was being noticed in the whole the span of conflict. One of the important lessons which for the from the perspective of grand strategy is the technological independence as the strategic imperative. Conflict highlighted the importance of indigenous defense capabilities, and India's demonstration was quite remarkable in terms of understanding the in terms of use of Akash missiles, Project Kusha, which reflected a sort of the importance and imperative of technological independence, and that is going to play a very critical role. In terms of the word was quite a buzzword, which was about escalation and de-escalation. India perfectly calibrated the escalation management, and it was through projecting right military capabilities without necessitating full scale war. And this was allowed from this actually represented a very firm demonstration of the intent, while still maintaining this sort of, shall I say, diplomatic flexibility, and the sort of avoiding the binaries of the war and peace scenario. So that was particularly very remarkable and noticeable in this uh, in this standoff. Doctrinal shifts were also very visible, which were from from a very defensive to a very proactive strategy. It was rapid response, comprehensive the layered defense and offense systems, precision powered projection without escalating to a total war was quite something which was remarkable. One thing which we have and a lot of defense analysts have time and again emphasized was on how the inter-service coordination and the joint operation is of particular importance. And this incident has particularly reminded us and again proved that the joint operations, particularly between the army, navy and the air force, has remarkably worked really well. Of course, Vikramaditya sir mentioned about the democratization of advanced military technologies. That is, of course, the double-edged sword, because cheaper technologies are not just available to the states but also to states like Pakistan and to the non-state actors. So that is something which is sort of something which India has to be cautious about. Lastly, one important from a very global perspective, there are global parallels and there are new warfare norms, which is particularly if you see the global wars which are happening right now, Ukraine, Russia, Israel, Palestine conflict. Sort of the perception management and narrative control has become very important here, as decisive as a very kinetic military sort of action which is happening right now. So for few initial, I think this is all from my side for the initial points. I would happy to go ahead with the questions in the session. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ankit, for that. I think one of the point which I was waiting to mention is, and that is something that you had in your introductory remarks, is that how India was completely in control of that escalation ladder per se, right? Because there was a constant escalation, de-escalation, diplomatic talks, while India, especially the Indian armed forces, did were they clearly showed that it was our ladder to control. Like, we know how to act in a very decisive and in a very controlled manner. I think all the DZMO pressers also reiterated that point again and again, that we are very cautious of where we are heading, and we know how to control the situation, which is the which I think which is the key to any disciplined and a proper armed forces, unlike our Western adversary. So from that, we'll come to Colonel Dr. Rajneet Singh, research fellow at the Manohar Parrikar Institute for Defense Studies and Analysis. Colonel, you have the floor.
Uh, Thank you, Weber, and I'm happy to participate in this panel discussion on a topic that sits at the intersection of technology, security, and geopolitics. That is the emergence of autonomous weapon systems and their impact on the evolving security dynamics between India and Pakistan. Autonomous weapon systems, as we understand, are platforms capable of selecting and engaging targets without direct human intervention. They are no longer, they don't lie in the realm of science fiction, and globally, militaries are integrating autonomy into their unmanned systems, and India is no exception. Over the past few years, India has steadily advanced in this domain. These technologies are beginning to shape how Indian armed forces prepare for the future conflicts, and the objective of inducting these systems in the armed forces are clear to all. India wishes to enhance operational effectiveness, reduce human casualties, and build resilience in a high threat environment. But with these developments come profound strategic implications, particularly in the context of our complex and often volatile relationship with Pakistan. Unlike the conventional weapons, autonomous systems can compress decision making timelines, and that introduces new challenge for deterrent stability in South Asia. So, how can one interpret the intent when machine makes a decision to act? The question arises, can these systems be trusted to operate without escalating crisis, especially in a region where communication channel between the two countries is fragile? So, this brings us to the issue of risk management. As we integrate autonomy into defense, we must address not only technical reliability, but also ethical use of these platforms and command accountability, beside factoring the potential for unintended escalation. Finally, we must examine how India can responsibly shape the development and deployment of these systems. And this will include strengthening our domestic R&D ecosystem, establishing legal and doctrinal framework for use, and engaging in regional and global dialogue on norms and control for autonomy in warfare. Uh, with that, Weber, I will finish my initial remarks and go on for the questions and answer session. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Colonel. With that, with the last introductory remarks, I think we will now come into the most fruitful part of this discussion, where we get to have insights from all of you regarding some of the questions which are lurking in the domain when it comes to maybe maritime studies or strategic studies in India. So, my first question would be directed to Rear Admiral K. Raja Menon, sir. So, this question would fall into the domains which is the unmanned sea power domain, right? So the question is that, sir, how can India use autonomous platforms to create a maritime asymmetry? Like, especially for the choke points that we have in the Arabian Sea. And, like, does this reflect a new policy shift from the traditional sea denial strategy that Indian Navy has always had? Like, can we change that from something from like sea denial to maybe sea control in the near future, sir?
Uh, Let me explain that in a few words. As far as our Western friend is concerned, uh, we always had sea control as a name. Sea denial, sea control with the objective of denying him the use of the sea. But sea control goes, in his case, beyond sea denial, and that is to influence the course of the land battle. And that is a role that Navy can perform if it has previously obtained sea control. And in this area, I want to caution from what I've heard from the other panel. Winning the drone war is good, but it's not nearly enough. We are talking about warheads of 25 kilos, 35 kilos. What is the object of war? Object of war is to change state behavior. You're not going to change state behavior by delivering 25, 30 kilos of warheads on him. You will win the drone war, but winning the drone war is a means to achieving air superiority so that the army and the air force can pulverize the enemy. That is the ultimate objective. And for that to occur, you're going to have to deliver thousands of kilos of explosives. So let me be clear as far as that is concerned. And those thousands of kilos of explosives can be delivered without arriving at the nuclear threshold. Why do I say that? Because I belong to a bunch of few veterans who, about 10 or 15 years ago, took part in nuclear war games with our Pakistani counterparts, senior armed forces officers from the Pakistan Armed Forces and diplomats, spread out over 2.5 years. And we discovered that the Pakistani nuclear threshold is actually fairly robust. But it is in their interest to signal to us that it's very low, and thereby try and blunt our conventional superiority. We shouldn't be taken in by this. We have to be very clear that if we go to war, it is to change state behavior. And that is not going to be achieved by merely winning the drone war. The drone war is a prelude to achieving air superiority, so that all the three services, the Army, Navy, and the Air Force, can operate against Pakistan with favorable air superiority. Not only to destroy Pakistani targets, but for the army to penetrate Pakistani land defenses. So all this has got to be kept in mind. As far as Pakistan's ability to influence choke points, it hasn't got any ability. The choke points and all that come in when we deal with our northern flank. And that is where we have favorable maritime geography, where it is still possible, with the help of both the Navy and the maritime strike capability of the Indian Air Force, to control the choke point. But as a prelude, as I said, this new technology is going to be a preliminary way of warfare before releasing massive amounts of ordnance that all the three services possess. And it is unless you start delivering those massive amounts of ordnance, you will not be able to change state behavior. Don't imagine that winning the drone war is going to change state behavior. This is a prelude to the ultimate operation, which is going to be a big operation. And let's keep that in mind. But as I said, Colonel Sodi has mentioned about two-front war. That is the worst eventuality. But that is a directive that must come from the government. If the government manages to influence foreign relations in such a way that the armed forces do not have to fight on more than one front, that's well and good. But if it is beyond the scope of the government and it resolves into a two-front war, then yes, then maybe we have to be prepared for a two-front war. That's all I have to say.
Thank you so much for that. I think, sir, you have made it very clear about your points on, I think, drone attacks. I think you have clearly said that you only envision them as the first line or the second line of suppression of enemy air defenses, sea attacks kind of thing, so that we can deliver higher payloads. Although I would laud your generosity for calling both of our Western and Eastern allies as not people, like both the countries, as friends. I think that is very generous coming from an Indian Navy officer. So now coming on for the next question, I'll come to Lieutenant Colonel J.S. Sodi. So, sir, this question would fall into the domain of the global conflicts. Like, what have we taken away from them? Like, how has India applied lessons, from example, from Ukraine or maybe from Gaza to enable precise drone warfare or aerial warfare, even against like advanced Turkish systems, which we clearly saw were being used in the recent operation?
Well, definitely the Indian armed forces learned a lot from the ongoing Russia-Ukraine war as well as the Israel-Hamas war, because we saw in both the wars, the drones were used in a big way. And definitely, there was a great change in the mindset and mentality of the Indian Armed Forces where we started thinking in a big way. And most of it was not in public domain. Let me be honest, before Operation Sindoor happened, not many of us, would have tended to believe that India has a robust integrated air defense system. I mean, personally, I would, admit that I always had this feeling that what would happen if, such a attack happened, how robust is our air defense system? And I would do a lot of reading and research on it. But there was not much in public domain. But Operation Sindoor proved that our armed forces, comprising the Army, Navy, Air Force, have the finest officers who actually keep up with the changing times. Like I said, most of it is never in the public domain, but they keep on reading, they keep on assessing what is happening the world over, and we integrate and assimilate what is required to be done, which was very evident in this 88-hour operation, where Pakistan launched over 1,000 drones right from Jammu and Kashmir down to Sir Creek. But our air defense system was so good, comprising whether the Russian S-400, the Israeli Barak 8, our own, vintage L-70, Z-23, you name it, and our systems were in place. So I would say definitely the Indian Armed Forces have learned a lot, like I said, and it is also part of our training or our peacetime operations where we have regular sand model discussions, we have lecturettes, we have of the cuff, these informal discussions. We have structured talks. So this is part of the peacetime exercises or the peacetime, assimilation which goes on. And I would also say, some of us civilians, especially those who are not, served in the armed forces, they tend to have a notion that what do the armed forces do in peace, because they see little ads of, armed forces officers playing golf or sailing or having a good evening in an officer institute. So the general thinking goes that these guys are having a great time, which is not the case. Because during peacetime we train for war, and this was evident in Operation Sindhu when in this brief 88-hour period we could thwart the enormous drones which Pakistan had sent, the conventional Al Fateh 2 missile, which was aimed at Delhi, which was neutralized over Sirsa. I mean, there is so much to talk about this operation because this actually in the futuristic history, we will see that this 88-hour operation brought out many facets of the Indian Armed Forces which are not known till date. So I would say that yes, we learn a lot. We keep on this learning process. We have a lot of course of instruction where such things are discussed, where the changing times are brought in, be the staff college course, be the NDC course, be the junior command course in the army, and the parallel course in the navy and the air force. So definitely during peacetime we learn a lot from what is happening in the world. So be it the Russia-Ukraine war or the Israel-Hamas war, we learned a lot, we imbibed, we assimilated, and we showed it to the entire world during Operation Sindhu.
Thank you so much for that. Again, sir, one of the points that I personally reflect upon is that, as you said, that many people, especially in the country, whether like people who have served before or civilians, we did not have an idea of how robust actually our air defense system was. For example, even for personally, I live in Jammu and Kashmir, right? So I live in Jammu. So I could see the continuous waves of drone attacks at major air bases and major army depot around the city, and then seeing that our air defense system were very robust and we could like shoot down every projectile which was aimed at the city or like in and around the LOC. It was a very proud moment as well to be like that. Okay, we have systems in place which can protect our our armed forces facilities and civilians as well. Something that we didn't see on the other side of the border, where our precision airstrikes or our precision drones did land a major punch at their air bases and at multiple radar installations as such. So with that, I would come for the next question to Captain KS Vikramaditya. So, sir, my question is like, how do autonomous systems enable India to monitor Pakistan's naval movements per se in the Arabian Sea? Because something that we saw again reiterated through a lot of discussions online is that how we have an integrated data link systems for our carrier battle groups, where we are able to monitor enemy movements in the sea for a very long range. So, like, if you could throw some light on that, sir.
Yeah, so Weber, as you would know that, the Indian Navy operates over a very, very large area. So even, if we have 10 to 12 ships on continuous deployment, which we've had for the past year and a half because of the issue in the Red Sea, and we've been combating piracy in the West Indian Ocean region, even that is not enough, right? So that obviously we need to have a kind of a layered concept to develop robust maritime domain awareness. And when we talk of maritime domain awareness, we don't only talk of surface awareness. We are talking of going up right till almost 100,000 feet, almost till near space, and going down to at least 1,000 meters. Where till depths where autonomous vehicles or vessels could operate and enemy submarines could operate. So the Indian Navy puts in a lot of effort to maintain, to develop MDA. We have a layered concept for NDA also. So at the outermost long ranges away from the coast of India, you have the P8Is, which which undertake surveillance as also underwater surveillance. And we have the largest fleet of P8Is after the US, right? At the same time, these are augmented by the MQ9s, two MQ9s, which we have on lease right now from General Atomics, which is an American company. And very soon, the Navy would be getting about 15 of these very, very high-end, high-endurance drones. Thereafter, as you come a little closer, you have other aircraft like the Donias, and we've been operating the Israeli Herons and Searchers for a very, very long time now. You also have, a cover which is provided by space-based AIS. Now, all these systems finally amalgamate along with our mission-based deployments into developing a common operational picture. A lot of analysis is done at the IMAC, which is your Information Management and Analysis Center at Gurgaon and Gurugram. And we also do a lot of information exchange with friendly foreign countries, with our partners, and this is done through the through the IFC IOR, Information Fusion Center for the Indian Ocean region, which currently hosts about 14 international liaison officers. This is going to increase to 40 in the very near future. The IMAC gets together a number of inputs. This very soon will graduate to something which we will call the National Maritime Domain Awareness System, which will amalgamate 7 ministries and 15 different agencies involved with the maritime field. The aim finally is not only Pakistan or China. The aim is to undertake holistic maritime security. That is to address all threats coming from the sea, within the sea, at sea, so on and so forth, which includes a lot of non-traditional maritime security threats like IUU fishing, like narcotics trade, which actually fuels, which funds terrorism, like piracy, armed robbery, smuggling, arms trafficking, so on and so forth. So this entire plethora of issues is handled by the Indian Navy in consonance with the Indian Coast Guard and some other maritime agencies. And everything starts with maritime domain awareness. Now, India is actually at the cusp of an autonomous and an unmanned revolution. Now, we are getting a huge number of different types of UAVs. We are also investing into USVs, which are surface vessels. And you'll be really surprised to see the kind of underwater autonomous vessels which are coming onto the scene. And it's not only the DRDO and the DPSUs which are producing these. Companies like L&T are coming out with an entire family of systems which can operate to depths of 1,000 meters. The Deep Ocean Mission of India, which is being undertaken by the NIOT, National Institute of Ocean Technology, they're in the process of testing a submersible which can go to 6,000 meters. Now, all these will actually come into protection of critical underwater infrastructure like seabed cables. It will help in prospecting for critical minerals undersea. We've been assigned 2 areas. So this is how the Indian Navy actually, in a very holistic manner, addresses MDA. And as we move on, autonomous systems and unmanned systems in the form of seabed systems, buoys, long-term buoys. We've got into a partnership with the US with something called Asia, the Autonomous Systems Industry Alliance, which is going ahead with in a big way in producing underwater domain awareness technologies, including autonomous systems. So that is our holistic and comprehensive approach towards holistic MDA and holistic maritime security.
Thank you so much for that, sir. I think this would help a lot of the audience online who are genuinely interested in this topic about how MDA not only works, as you said, on surface, but subsurface and over the surface as well. Like, for example, from aircrafts or even interlinked satellites, from what we have seen in the recent past. I think it is a great value for our audience now that they learn about what all technologies we are going to have in the future and what all technologies we are using today to have maritime domain awareness. With that, I would come to the next question, which is directed towards Mr. Ankit Kumar. So, sir, the question reflects that whatever the new nature of conflict that we are seeing around the world, like, has the India-Pakistan conflict shifted from from a conventional to a tech-centric battlefield now? How have like autonomous systems changed the character of warfare? Because we see Pakistan using a large number of autonomous systems this times per se, because they couldn't enter the Indian airspace due to the robust air defense system, which is vis-a-vis from the 2019 skirmish, which is very different from that, where we saw PF aircraft trying to enter the Indian airspace. So, sir, how do you think this has changed?
Am I audible now?
Yes, sir, you're audible.
Yeah. Oh, rightly, Vaibhav, as you mentioned, the 2019 standoff which happened between India and Pakistan was, the standoff right now is quite different from, the standoff which happened in 2019, where, the question of, the one aircraft, was a big point of, sort of center of the discussion. We could not, think 4 or 5 years back, where the incoming of, the drones playing a bigger role. Yet, rightly mentioned, there have been a lot of, particularly from the warfare dynamics. If I tell you, the technological advancements have, shaped some fundamental transformation, particularly with this standoff. If you look into some of the quantitative analysis of India's defense, sort of defense manufacturing, Operation Sindoor particularly, sort of represents operational validation in terms of the transformation which has taken place, or particularly the Make in India initiative. The use of the BrahMos missile, Akash, the surface to air missile has particularly and especially the AI enhanced Akash Tir system was played a very remarkable role in terms of the specifically in terms of the target and the precision, that played a very bigger role in sort of the shaping the battlefield. Other than that, I particularly feel that the electronic warfare dominance played a very greater role, both on the both sides. If you particularly see on the Indian and on the Pakistani sides, that have played a very critical role in terms of the how conflict have shaped. Precision strike has totally changed the sort of how we have seen war, particularly how the precision, the strike which used to happen 5 to 6 years, the operational data and which is available in the public domain. If you see, there has been the precision in terms of the percentage have drastically has come very, the collateral damage has become very less. So few very interesting stats which have come out by in the open source. If I particularly mention about the in terms of defense procurement, India has increased defense procurement from sort of from 30% to 65% by 2025. sort of India has in terms of manufacturing capacity, and in terms of export, that India has performed really well. So a lot of great sort of a good transformation in terms of how there have been technological advancement, and there is a fundamental shift which is happening, particularly in the South Asian context.
Uh, Thank you so much for that point, sir. I think, again, as you reiterated, conflict has, like, even the India-Pakistan conflict has changed so much from, for example, what we saw in 2019 to now. With that, I would come to the last first series of questions, which was mainly involving autonomous systems. And this question is directed to Colonel Dr. Rajneet Singh. So, sir, in the domains of strategic deterrence and like gray zone dynamics, based on your work as well, how are autonomous defense systems reshaping India's deterrence posture or like escalation control, especially in the subconventional and gray zone spectrum of the India-Pakistan conflict, sir?
Okay, Vaibhav, before addressing the issue of escalation control, it's important to first understand why deterrence has often failed between India and Pakistan. That is, despite both nations possessing nuclear weapons. This failure can be explained through the concept of stability instability paradox, which suggests that while nuclear weapons may prevent war at higher levels of escalation metrics, they can paradoxically encourage limited wars and conflict because adversaries, that is India and Pakistan in this case, believe risk of nuclear escalation remains low. This paradox has actually played out repeatedly in India Pakistan context, where the two sides have engaged in limited wars and conflict situations. But as recent events following the Pahalgam terrorist attack showed, that escalations can happen quickly. This conflict escalated geographically and in military terms when both sides employed new weapons, that is, in terms of drones, missiles, and whatever you had, as also tactics that had not been used before. In fact, the key moment in the conflict came when India targeted Pakistan's Noor Khan Air Base, raising concerns that Pakistan might see this as a threat to its nuclear command infrastructure. Now, with the rise of autonomous weapon systems, we face a new challenge. These systems can select and engage targets, as I had mentioned in my initial remarks, also without human intervention. While India and Pakistan currently use semi autonomous, precision guided weapons, fully autonomous systems are on the horizon. And this introduces both opportunities and risk. On one hand, autonomous systems could strengthen deterrence, and they can do so because they can react faster, they can remain alert for long, long time, and also strike more efficiently than human operators. And this makes nations appear more formidable. But then there is a downside also. Machines are not infallible. A miscalculation by an autonomous system can trigger unintended conflict. Furthermore, when decisions are made at the speed of machines, there's little room for human oversight, and this increases the risk of escalation. In India Pakistan context, if both sides deploy such systems, a simple misfire could rapidly spiral into a full scale war. And then there is also a question of accountability. Who is responsible when machines make such a catastrophic mistake? So ultimately, the challenge for policymakers and military leaders is not only to advance technology, but it is also to ensure that we retain human control over its deployment to avoid catastrophic mistakes.
Thank you so much, sir. I think you have rightly included a point which is much needed. That at the end of the day, it has to be a human which has to be in control of especially such a lethal weapon when we are talking about.
Last
Because
word, Vaibhav, last word.
yes, sir.
Yeah, I noticed you haven't got anyone from the Air Force here, which is a pity. But before we conclude, I just want to say I want to congratulate the Army and the Air Force. I think our the use of our drones was more successful. Also, our anti-drone system, the Akash Tir, has performed outstandingly. That integrated air defense organization that we've set up in the last 10, 14 years has done outstandingly well. So there is no question that we won the battle with the autonomous systems. But what remained is, as I said, the big issue facing us, which is to permanently change state behavior. With that, I conclude.
So can I just have one comment, Weber?
Yes, sir. That's perfectly
Yeah,
fine.
this is actually, this is with regard to Colonel Rajneesh's, he's brought out the downsides of autonomy. Now, see, when we talk of autonomous systems at this stage, we are not talking of systems, something which will take off on its own. The autonomous system is the autonomy is being used to make it more successful in discriminating its target and, being more accurate. So now I would say, supposing you have an artillery shell. An artillery shell is absolutely unguided. It's a wide area weapon, and one shell will, cause so much of damage. Whereas an autonomous system actually sort of facilitates precision targeting. So very often we tend to sort of tie ourselves in knots with this thing of autonomy, because we tend to equate this with the civil world. Now, if you equate a weapon system, say, with an autonomous car which is driving around in Delhi, now it's an apples and oranges kind of a comparison. The liability there, the requirement there is totally different. Now, out here, if I decide to use a weapon, the very fact that I'm deciding to use a weapon against the enemy is I have control. I'm absolutely liable for that. In case something goes wrong, the liability rests with me. And that autonomy is to the extent that in case it, say, faces electronic warfare, it gets jammed, it is able to do obstacle avoidance, it is able to do, navigation, it is able to home on to amongst a bunch of people, say, one particular person, giving it more precision and accuracy. Now, in terms of laws and in terms of ethical use, again, we tend to kind of tie ourselves in knots. The entire world is going ahead with this. So we have to keep this in mind, that we should not get in false equivalence with the civil world. Ours is a very, very simple world when it comes to things of ethics, actually. And you will find, in my opinion, autonomy actually increases. We are not talking of a nuclear missile which will just take off on its own. It will decide one fine day. We are talking about, a person controlling the launch of a system. That system goes, it faces electronic warfare, it faces jamming, it becomes autonomous. It starts navigating on its own based on certain pre-fed logic, or based on AI in terms of being able to, avoid obstacles, recognize particular targets and going and targeting them. So it is much better than the warfare which we had, much more complicated, but much more precise, much more accurate, much more discriminatory as compared to the warfare that we have been exposed to thus far.
Thank you so much for that point. Again, sir, I think as you mentioned, there is a lot of nuances when it comes to autonomous systems, as you have said. Like, obviously, it is much more complex than a machine deciding that suddenly I have to launch, or something like that. And a lot of defense systems, either way, are very fail-proof in terms of redundancies is something that we have witnessed. So again, like reiterating that point, that there is obviously a lot of nuance when it comes to autonomous systems. Something that we have seen, for example, Russia recently came out with a new modification for their aircraft, where they said that okay, this will now have a AI based helping system for the pilot to choose targets, or choose enemies, or fire what kind of missiles. I think obviously in the defense industry, everything would come with a level of fail safe, and with a level of understanding that at the end of the day, it is a system which is gonna deliver some kind of munition. So there is a lot of responsibility when it comes to that domain, and I am pretty sure that our armed forces are more than responsible, or more than more than ready to take that responsibility as well. you said. With that, if there aren't any concluding remarks from anybody else, I would move into the conclusion of this panel. It was great having everyone here, so many different insights. But as Rear Admiral Radhamanan said, so it was a pity for us not to have not to have someone from the Indian Air Force, because that would have just added so much to this central defense staff interoperability domain. We would have loved to have somebody from there. So greetings everyone. This was the panel from GeoStrata on how autonomous battles and how the Indian-Pakistan conflict can be reimagined, or the India-China conflict in the near future can be reimagined in this age of intelligence warfare. Thank you so much for tuning in. And again, thank you all of you for being a part of this panel.